All right. Good afternoon. We appreciate you guys joining us. Um, Welcome to how many is this now? I think it's our third town hall to discuss Kentucky EVV. And we'll kind of jump over into, as you guys may have noticed this time, we switched platforms. We were in Teams the last couple of weeks doing our town halls, and we have transitioned over to Zoom, which we hope will be a little bit more user friendly. Certainly, if you're having any trouble hearing, we've got some instructions for you here on the screen and the dial in and meeting ID should you need to use the phone. Obviously, if you're in here and hearing my voice, you probably have figured out a way to do this. But if at some point you were to drop and need to go to phone, we have this information available. I also want to encourage folks, it looks like several of you have already located and identified the Q&A box, which is fantastic, within the Zoom platform. Part of our reason for wanting to transition over to Zoom was the enhanced ability to capture the questions that you guys are submitting, to be able to be responsive to them, and honestly for us to capture that information so that we can take it back and publish answers and get those posted up on both the Therap site as well as the CHFS site, so that you guys can refer to that as a resource going forward. So glad you guys already have some familiarity with Zoom. Certainly the events of the last few years have gotten us all used to being on a lot of different platforms. So I'm sure you guys will not have any trouble. I'm going to go ahead and kick us off officially here. Again, hopefully by now you guys have seen me a few times, but if you have not, my name is Jason Laws. I'm one of the Therap leads for the Kentucky EVV implementation. As you can see, I've worn a few hats at Therap through the years, but these days I've spent a great deal of my time with the folks in Kentucky, both kind of as a liaison between the providers and Therap and helping initiate the onboarding process, also working directly with the state around requirements and making sure that our system does all the things that it's supposed to do, and that we're working to get you guys onboarded and effectively using EVV over the course of the next few months. So it's again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, and thank you guys for giving us some of your time. In terms of our agenda today, we've got we're kind of transitioning a little bit from where we were in the last couple of calls. If you guys have been with us, you know that we've spent a fair amount of our time talking about kind of that onboarding process, what to expect, what the kind of communication that you're getting from Therap, how to initiate that process on your own, and that sort of thing. And we're going to touch on that very quickly at the beginning. You know, there's always folks that for whatever reason you may not have been able to be on the previous calls. So we want to make sure you're getting the information. So I am going to touch on just a high level overview of the project so that everybody's on the same page, and talk a little bit about how to initiate that onboarding process if you have not yet done so. Certainly at this point, our hope is that you have communicated with us in some form or fashion. But if you have not, for whatever reason, I'm going to get you the information that you need to do that. But then we're going to get to what the real focus is of today's particular town hall, and that is the preparation for the time that you're going to be spending with us. A big part of the onboarding process is the one-on-one time that you're going to be spending with our specialists to get in there and get your EVV account set up, and doing all the creation of users and staff and services and service ops and all the fun stuff that goes along with getting your platform ready to roll with EVV. And what we're going to talk about today is kind of the preparation for that, in terms of, once I get on the phone with that guy from Therap, what exactly is the information I need to have on him, so that you're not ruffling through files, you're not digging through your databases. You've got that data quickly available, and it will just make the onboarding process that much more efficient. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some other considerations in terms of things to think about that are helpful before you get on the phone with us. Certainly, we've got a wealth of experience and are happy to share that with you and offer our 2 cents on things that can be helpful when we're talking to you. But the more time that you've given to kind of thinking about this and preparing, the better we think the experience will be. So we'll talk about some of those considerations in terms of who are the people I want on the call, what is the knowledge base and skill set that I want represented on the calls with Therap. So we're going to talk about those kinds of things today. And we're also going to set the stage for what you can expect with the town hall coming up over the course of the next few weeks, so that you can kind of anticipate what are the primary topics to be covered, and depending on your particular circumstances, whether or not it's something that you want to make sure you're there for, or maybe it's something you already have a good grasp of and don't. Again, we certainly hope you guys will join us for all the town halls, but we want to give you the information that you need in order to be able to prioritize your time. And then again, as you may have heard momentarily before we officially kick off, we're going to close out as we always do with touching on some frequently asked questions that we received last week in our town hall. I'm also going to show you where to access the full list of FAQs from all of our town halls. We've now posted quite a few of them from the last 2 weeks on our site. So I'm going to show you what that looks like and where you can get that, and we'll discuss any of the big questions that come in today. So that's kind of the plan. And with that in mind, let's go ahead and get this thing started. And as I said, hopefully everybody knows everything that you're getting ready to see on the next couple of slides. But in the event you do not, again, let me kind of introduce who we are. We are Therap Services, and we are the selected vendor for electronic visit verification for home health and ultimately for personal care services in the state of Kentucky. Part of that process is offering you guys, through our contract with the state, access to a fully mature EVV platform. The other part of that contract with the state is that we also offer what we refer to as an EVV aggregator, which is essentially kind of a separate application. Think of them as two different things. We have our EVV system, we have our aggregator. The EVV system is what collects data on the front end. So you're able to use it to collect EVV data. The aggregator is the repository that data then transitions over to. And the reason that those two things act separately is because Kentucky, as I've said many times in their wisdom, which we absolutely appreciate, is doing what we refer to as an open model of EVV in the state. So you can use the selected vendor, which is us, Therap, or if you have your own preferred third-party vendor that you're either already using or intend to use that can do EVV, you're certainly more than welcome to use that vendor as well, as long as they can send data over to the aggregator. That way, whether you're using Therap or you're using another vendor, the data is all ending up in the same place within that aggregator, and then that's what's going to ultimately be used to validate your claims and do all the things that EVV is designed to do. So we'll talk a little more about that in just a moment, but in terms of timelines and things, we're obviously focused right now on home health. That is phase one of this particular project. You can see here that the go live date is 12/28/23. And for those of you that weren't with us last week, I want to explain that date because you probably had 1/1/24 in your head. And effectively 1/1/24 is still the date of the mandate. It is on that date that you are required to begin utilizing or conducting EVV services within your organization. But we're going to make sure that you have all of the tools and everything available to go live on the 28th. So that's why we are using that date. So you kind of have a couple of days in there, but that's the expectation. So wanted to make sure we clarified that. And additional updates around any of these kinds of information can certainly be found on the CHFS website that I've got linked here. We also have a resource page on the Therap site that I'm going to pull up in just a few minutes as we continue to go through the presentation so that you guys can see the information we have there as well. So that's kind of the high level overview. And so the general timeline, which we've already kind of talked about, is, we've kicked off our initial town hall a couple of weeks back. We're kind of moved solidly into the provider onboarding portion of the implementation process. Several of you we have already communicated with. A great deal of you have submitted your information. We greatly appreciate that. And based on that, we've been in follow-up with you to either initiate the onboarding itself if you're going to utilize Therap's EVV platform, or to get you the necessary agreements and information that you need if you're going to be using third party. I know we've already had several calls with folks to begin that process. I know there's several more that are scheduled and are continuing to get scheduled each day. So really appreciate those of you that have submitted that information, and we're excited to be working with you. As we continue to move on and kind of move through provider onboarding, we're going to start transitioning over into a little more formal training and information sessions. And in many ways, that's kind of what the town halls are going to slowly transition into over the course of the next few weeks, where we're going to, again, as I said, kind of transition from just the onboarding process. How do we get this thing set up over to, within the next few weeks, how do we actually use it? How do we create schedules in the system? How does our staff check in and check out? And how do we collect that EVV data and ultimately send that over to the aggregator? So that's kind of the sequence of events we're going to be following. Then into late November and December, we'll obviously be doing our final testing and training and everything with that anticipated go live date. of 12/28. So that's the timeline that we're looking at. And so what's your role? What's the processes that you guys can expect and the expectations that we have? Well, again, and I know I'm beating a dead horse here. I've said this many, many times, but I think it's very crucial for folks to have an understanding of the options that you have available to you. So we'll keep talking about these so that you guys understand exactly the choices that you have to make and the options that you have available. You have two different ways of approaching this EVV requirement here in the state of Kentucky. Option number one is where most of the conversation is, because it's utilizing TheraP's electronic visit verification platform that is covered and made available to you as part of the state contract. You have the option using that system. It will then feed data over to the aggregator. You also have the option, should you choose to use it, to send claims in to MMIS or your MCOs or your payors, and all of this is available to you at no cost. And we expect that's where the majority of folks will be. That being said, as I mentioned before, you also have the option of using a third-party system, should you choose to do it. And essentially what that means is you can use another vendor and their EVV platform. And as long as they can meet the requirements and submit data to the EVV aggregator, then you can continue to use that. It will send that information over and you will meet regulations there. And ultimately, everybody's data kind of meets in the middle, right? It's all going to end up meeting in the aggregator. Obviously, should you choose to use a third-party vendor, that will be done at your own expense, just to make sure. I suspect most everybody understands that, but want to make sure that that's clear to you. That one little bit there in parentheses at the bottom, I do always like to touch on, just in case folks have questions. If you are already a TheraP user, which I don't believe there are anybody on the home health side that are doing that. I know there's more on the personal care side. But if there are, or you want to utilize TheraP beyond just its EVV capabilities, we do have an electronic record that does a lot of other stuff. Should you choose to do that, you can have a private account with TheraP and share data as any other third-party vendor would to the aggregator. That is an option that is available. That's what I mean by that down in parentheses. If you have questions about that, please reach out to us and we'll talk to you a little bit more about that as well. But generally speaking, these are the two options that are available. Now, the onboarding and training piece, again, this is a repeat of a lot of the information some of you may have heard before, but we want to make sure everybody understands exactly what's going on here. So your training is really going to take on largely three different buckets of activities. First are the town halls where you're sitting at this very moment, kind of our opportunity to share information with you, let you know what's going on, let you know kind of what's coming up for you to expect in the coming weeks, where the resources are going to be, all of that sort of stuff. We're going to keep scheduling these every Wednesday afternoon from now through the entire implementation period. And as I said earlier, we're going to be sharing with you what the anticipated agendas for these are going to be. But on top of the sharing of information from us, it's also going to be an opportunity for you guys to ask questions, get those questions answered as well. So that's the design of the town hall. The onboarding part is a little more direct relationship with TheraP. This is going to be where you're doing your one-on-ones with our specialists to set up your account, to get in there and get in the individuals and users and auths and everything that goes into conducting EVV services. We're going to be taking you step by step by step through how to do that process over a series of calls. It's 2 to 3 calls typically, depending on how much is covered in each call and exactly which of the components of the TheraP system that you choose to utilize. We offer a full billing and claiming system should you choose to use that, but you are by no means obligated to do so. So there's an extra call for billing if you want to use that part, but if you just focus on the EVV part, we'll keep it there. But that's going to be the focus of the onboarding call, and you'll have a specialist working directly with you to conduct those activities. Then the last piece is the training. How do we actually use the system? How do we create schedules? How do we have folks check in, check out, and do everything that they need to do? And so we're going to be providing that type of training in a variety of ways. We're going to be going over that material in our town halls. It's going to be one of the ones we're doing in a couple of weeks, I believe it is. I've got the exact dates a little later in the slide deck, but we'll be touching on it there. We'll be reporting those, making them available to you. We also have a ton of asynchronous training materials that we're going to share with you We have an internal course, e-course that we created at Therap that's going to be getting shared with all of you that folks can walk through step by step to learn all of the pieces of completing EVV within the Therap application. So all of those things are going to be made available to you, and it's what you can expect coming up soon. But in order to get all that started, you got to start the onboarding process. And again, as I said earlier, a lot of you have already done this, and we really appreciate that. You guys kind of getting out there and getting this ball rolling. But for any of you, for whatever reason, you have not yet done this, we really need you to start that immediately. Given the trainings that are coming up, if you delay it any further to start this process, quite frankly, you're going to get a little behind, and you're going to be disadvantaged when it comes to trying to be up and ready to roll to meet that 1-1 deadline. So you really need to get this going. You should have all by now received a link to a job form, which is really kind of the kickoff point for the onboarding process. It's where you're going to be able to go in and categorize yourself and answer a series of questions. And I've actually got a link in here to the actual form so you can see. You're going to get an email from us that has a link to this form where you can go in and say, I'm planning on using Therap EVV. I can collect that, and it's going to give me a series of questions that you can go in and ask about yourself, the administrators within your agency, contact info, all of that stuff. And when you submit that, you're then going to be able to schedule a one-on-one time with the folks within Therap. If you're planning on using a third-party EVV vendor, you can select that, and we're going to ask you a series of slightly different questions. Some will be the same, but we're also going to ask you, okay, who's the third-party vendor you expect to use, their contact information, all in the interest of helping us facilitate the process of getting your chosen vendor certified and ready to share information with our aggregator. So again, that's the job form that we're sharing with you that kind of kicks this whole process off. And if for whatever reason, you or someone at your organization has not yet submitted one of these job forms, or God forbid, has not yet seen this job form, has not received it, either because a name got missed on a list or an email got overlooked or whatever the case may be, please reach out to us immediately and let us know. And we will follow up with you immediately to get you the information that you need. You can reach us at the email address you see in the middle of the screen at kysupport@therapservices.net. You can also reach the state at Medicaid public comment at ky.gov, either of which, if should you go in there and send an information, we ask that you include your name, contact info, as well as the name of your organization and provider number. That will help us in following up with you and really expediting the process. So please get back to us as quickly as you can if you have not yet seen or completed that job form. And we would greatly appreciate that. And so once you schedule with us, as I said, you're going to be going through a series of calls with the Therap team now. And I'm focusing largely at the beginning here on those folks that are going to be using Therap EVV platform. And we'll talk about third-party folks in just a moment. Excuse me. On the Therap EVV platform, for those users, we're going to focus on first the setup of your Therap account, how to get in the basics of how to set up your administrative access, set up your programs and sites. I'm going to talk more about those in a few minutes, but those are generally speaking kind of your services and the locations, how to get the individuals that you're supporting into the system, how to create your users, which are going to be your staff, the folks that are logging in every day to either create schedules, to check in, to check out, to set up the appropriate privileging in the system so that folks are able to do the things that they need to do. So that's really the crux of the first call that you have. After that, as you progress through the calls and the content, we'll then transition over to more EVV specific setup. So that's some specific configuration within your account to make it reflect the services that you provide and how you want some of the EVV components in there tracked. Obviously, we have kind of preset all of your accounts in a way that reflects what you need to be able to do for the state of Kentucky, but we also understand that within each organization, there is some nuance in terms of the services you have and the needs that you have. So we're going to work with you to set that up to reflect your needs as an organization. Then the last piece, as I mentioned before, should you choose to utilize Therap's billing and claiming system, we will have a call dedicated to that. We have our billing specialist, Kelly Galloway, who's actually joining us this afternoon, I believe. And Kelly is going to be the one that will work with you on setting up all the things you need to know to be able to directly submit claims to the Kentucky MMIS and or the MCOs, whatever your appropriate payors are going to be. So that's what we're going to walk you through. Now, the other side of the coin, for those folks that are going to be utilizing utilizing a third-party vendor for electronic visit verification, the process is a little bit different. Obviously, since you're going to be using a different vendor, you're not going to be setting up a front-end Therap account to conduct EVV. But what we'll do with you guys is work with you to essentially get your vendor set up so that it can share information with our aggregator. And so the first thing that will happen when you submit your intent to use a third party is you're going to receive from us some documents requesting signature through DocuSign. These documents are going to be the EVV vendor attestation requirements. It's going to outline all the things that your EVV vendor needs to be able to do. We're going to give you our business associate agreement for the EAA, which is for signing and completion. That'll go to you as well as your desired vendor. And then we have an end user legal agreement, or EULA, for signing and completion. Once those things are completed and returned, then we can provide to you your aggregator specs and the testing access credentials. Now, I want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about a question that we've received, and I may end up talking a little bit more about it towards the end of the presentation today, but I think it's important for you guys to hear. We've had a request, a completely understandable one, that some of you guys are in large organizations and trying to get sign off on business user agreements and all that fun stuff isn't a 5-minute ordeal. It can be quite a process getting your legal folks involved in whatever needs to happen there. And so the request specifically was whether we would go ahead and share our API specs while you're reviewing the legal docs so that your vendors can start taking a look at them and getting their preparations in order to be able to meet those requirements and share data with the aggregator. We are certainly happy to do that. We will go ahead and get those API specs to you guys at your request. We will send them ahead of completion of this so that you guys can expedite the process. Now, one thing I want to be very, very clear about, and you can communicate this to your vendors as well, is that we are not going to send API specs directly to your vendor when they're the ones reaching out to us. And the reason for that is certainly not a critique of them or you or anybody else. It's just for our purposes, our obligation and responsibility is to work with you guys, the providers of the state of Kentucky, to be able to meet requirements. And when we have vendors kind of coming out to us, we can't verify who they work with in the state. And so we don't want to spend our time talking directly to a vendor if we can't validate, yes, in fact, they're working with these providers. Yes, in fact, they can meet their needs and all this sort of stuff. So we're happy to share the information, but we're going to have to work through you to do the sharing of that. So please make sure that your vendors, if that's something that you want to do, that the request is coming from you, we'll share it with you and you can get it to your vendors. Hopefully that makes sense, kind of the reason why we're doing it that way. We're not trying to be difficult. It's just our way of managing the information sharing and making sure we're getting the right folks involved, and certainly reach out to us if there are any questions about that. But once we get you the information that you need, again, your folks are going to be able to test on their own schedules, but we do have a technical lead that will be available to them to answer any questions and help them complete the needed certification. Again, though, with the expectation that these things are going to be done and ready for folks to go live by the go live date. So that's the process for third-party vendors. What I want to talk about now is kind of what I alluded to at the beginning, kind of the preparation that you guys, particularly those of you who are going to be using Therap EVV platform, the kinds of preparations that you can make before you end up on the call with our specialists. Now, again, our specialists absolutely understand that you guys are coming in, most of you, without a whole lot of context for Therap, and in some cases, perhaps not a ton of context for EVV as well. And we know that, and we're certainly prepared to work with you and support you through the entire process. Having said that, a little preparation on your part can be beneficial, certainly to you in making that process go that much more smoothly. So we want to talk about a few things that can be extremely helpful to the process if you've given it some thought and have some particular, here as you can see on your screen, particular pieces of data available when you get on with our specialist. One of the first things that you want to think about is making sure you know which of the particular services that you provide are EVV required? Which ones are going to be set up for EVV? Now, most of you probably already know the answer to these questions, but just in the event that you don't, we've got a link here. This is going actually over to our Kentucky EVV site on the SERAP main site. And if you scroll down to the bottom of that, you're going to see all of the billing service codes. Let's click on the wrong thing. Let me go back. Apologies, guys. There we go. So on our billing service codes here, you can see exactly which service codes will be required for EVV. So you can take a look there. One of the things that we have done actually, or will do within all of your accounts, we're actually pre-populating the service directories in those accounts with the EVV required services just to save some time and make it easier on you guys. But we also understand you guys don't utilize all of those things. So we're going to work with you to clean that information up. But the more information you have available, the easier that process will be. It's also good for you guys to know your list of associated payors. Are you just doing EVV? Are you just submitting claims to MIS and conducting your EVV service delivery that way? Do you also work with MCOs? Is it a combination of MCOs? Knowing who your payors are going to be is going to be really helpful as well when you get on there. So having that info available. You also are going to want to know about your particular service location, those that are associated with EVV service authorization. Now, what exactly does that mean? Now, we know that many of you all conduct services in multiple locations, either through multiple facilities and people's homes and all of those different things. And with all of the individuals that receive EVV-based services, they're going to have a service authorization that dictates what service they receive, what units, all that sort of stuff. And that service authorization is going to have a particular location associated with it. And that's part of the information we've got to create within our system. And in our system, we refer to things like programs and sites, which are the physical locations where services are delivered. And part of the setup process is getting those things created inside of the system. It's not a complicated process at all to create those things. We just want to make sure that you guys are anticipating that so that you have that information available to you. Again, it will just make that much easier. Then we get to the real stars of the show, and here are the actual individuals that you guys work with, the folks that you're providing service for. Obviously, we've got to get those folks' information into the system. And so having that information available to you right there as we're doing the onboarding is going to make it that much more helpful and efficient. So as you can see here, I've included a few data elements associated with individuals. This is far from the comprehensive list of fields that we have available to capture information about individuals. So if you have a whole lot more information and you want to put more information in the system, you're certainly welcome to do that, to track that. But these are the core pieces of information that need to be in place: name, gender, DOB, Medicaid numbers, phone numbers, and then the residential address, which can then be used to create the geolocation, which is ultimately going to be used for the individual and tracking that EVV. Where's the anticipated service delivery going to happen at? That most often is going to come from the residential address of the individual. So having that data available to you so that it can quickly be entered into the system is going to make it work that much more quickly as you're working with our professionals. Some other data points, obviously, we've got to get our staff in there, right? We got to get the folks that are logging and providing services. And in our system, we refer to those folks as users because they're the ones logging in and using the system most commonly. But for you guys, it's going to be your staff. And you're going to have a variety of staff. You're going to have some folks that are more administrative by nature. Excuse me, more administrative by nature. Some folks are going to be creating schedules, and then a whole lot of folks are going to be checking in and out of schedules. And so getting those folks into the system is going to be important. Again, don't need a ton of information about a user in the system to create them, but the key pieces we want you to have, obviously their name and their social security number. The reason the social security number is important is because every user is created basically is going to have a unique identification created from a combination of their name and social. So we want to make sure that you have that data available to get it in there. And then the desired login that you see here, if available. This essentially, when you create a user in our system, you have to create a login for that user. Now, some of you may have a standard convention that you want to use, like first name dot last name or something like that. And so you can have that available. Others of you may, within some of your other internal systems, have a typical, every user has a unique identifier that you use, that they use to log into other systems, and you want to replicate that in Therap, and certainly you can do that. So just, again, knowing that part of the creation of the user is to create a login for them. So if there is a prefabricated login name that you want to use for folks, you're going to want to have that available as well. You're also going to want to have your Medicaid provider number or numbers. I know many of you may have multiple Medicaid provider numbers. Having that data in there will facilitate getting the whole setup piece in place so that you can conduct EVV services. If you are choosing to bill and claim, or claim, or I guess both, through the Therap application, as we said, again, just to be clear, is an optional service, but should you choose to do it, we are going to need your NPI number to be able to do it. So if that is part of your intent, make sure you have that data available. And then also have the service authorizations for your EVV individuals available. I think that piece, the creation of the EVV authorization, largely is going to happen on your second call with us. We'll get in there and do that. But you want to make sure you have that in there that identifies what services an individual receives, the units, and all of that stuff. Again, you'll notice that I explicitly put on here for EVV only. We know some of you, and maybe many of you, may provide services outside of EVV. This state contract is designed for electronic visit verification. So if you provide other non-EVV services, that's great, but this is not designed to capture that. So we're not going to be putting in authorizations for a lot of the other services that you may provide. Again, just want to make sure that that's clear and understood. And again, if you have any questions about the specific services, please check out the list that I had a minute ago. And I'm going to show you that site again multiple times before we finish up the call today. So I want to make sure that folks understand that. Then the other piece, as I said, beyond just the data that you have available, some considerations and things that are worth thinking about before you get on with our users, just so that you can make the most of the time that you have with them. And probably the most important thing in terms of your preparation and your considerations is making sure that you got the right folks involved. And in particular, the folks that are kind of the EVV team leads, the folks that really understand how EVV works within the organization, are used to administering those services. They kind of know the roles involved. We want to make sure those folks are there. Again, our team has a wealth of experience with EVV. We can talk through a lot of these scenarios with you, but the more expertise that you bring to the table on your side, the easier this process is going to be for us to get an appropriate setup that really reflects the structure of your organization. Huge part of that is kind of understanding that EVV workflow, from kind of the overall administration, from the scheduling administration to the checking in and the checking out, who's reviewing those submissions and doing edits and putting in exception codes as needed, that sort of thing that all goes into EVV. It's important to have folks within your organization that have familiarity with that. If you've not done EVV before, or you don't necessarily know the answer to those questions, feel free to reach out with any questions that you may have, and we'll certainly be happy to share that with you. We've also got a lot of resources on our site that can kind of help you understand some of the roles associated here, so please feel free to check out that information as well. When I talk about kind of these three things here that you're going to want to know right off the jump, the system administration, these are really the folks that understand the big picture, right? They kind of understand the entire organizational structure, how EVV is going to fit within it, within the services being provided. So they'll kind of help connect the dots for others. So we want to make sure that knowledge base is represented on the call. The folks that manage your schedules, they're likely going to be the ones that are going in there creating the slots for staff to be able to check in and out and provide services. We want those folks around. And if you choose to utilize billing, ultimately, like I said, that'll be one of the later calls that you have with us, but you want to have the expertise associated with that billing and claiming. Again, to be really clear, one of the kind of gray areas here is when we talk about service authorization. Whether or not you actually bill through Therap or you have your own other billing system that you choose to utilize, service authorizations are going to be a part of this. And we typically associate service auth with billing. But even if you're not using our billing system, you're still going to need to create service authorizations in Therap, because that's the basis for the EVV service. That's where the information about the individuals, and the services they receive and all of that that's used to create schedule slots and all that sort of stuff comes from. So we want to make sure that you have somebody that has a very strong understanding of your service authorization on those calls as well. On top of that, a couple of other things to think about are what we refer to in Therap as caseloads and roles. And in the simplest terms that I can possibly provide to you, when we talk about caseloads, it's who needs to access it. If I am a staff member working within your organization, let's say perhaps you support 250 people in some form of home health services, but me as a caregiver, I only work with 3 of them. When I log in to Therap to conduct my EVV, I only need to see the people that I work with, right? I don't need to see the records for all 250. I need to get to those 3 people that I routinely work with. So you're able to set up caseloads within Therap that reflect that so that a user's only seeing who they need to see. Now, certainly you're going to have administrators that may need an agency-wide caseload where they're seeing everyone, and that's fine. We can easily accommodate that. But not everybody's going to need that level of access. So kind of knowing who works with who is an important part of setting up user access as well. Similarly, when we talk about roles, in our system, we've got 2 different kinds of roles. We've got what we call administrative roles, and then we've got what we call super roles. And both of those are designed to basically set up a user to be able to do what they need to do in the system, and no more, no less, right? We don't want folks getting in there and not being able to complete what they need to do. But we also don't want folks going in there and accessing parts of the system that they have no reason to access and all of that sort of stuff. So within the system, roles are set up to control what users and their activity. Now, we have pre-populated your accounts with roles that we know are going to be needed for EVV, so you've got that in there. But part of what we discussed with you during the onboarding process is how those roles work, what the roles are related to checking them out and to billing and to scheduling and all of that sort of stuff. So the more familiarity with those kinds of things that you can bring to bear on the call, the experience that folks have bringing with, when you're getting on the line with our specialists, the more prepared you'll be and the better I think the experience will be for everyone. So I think those were the primary things that we wanted to communicate in terms of preparing and being ready to go when you hop on there with our specialists. And so what I want to do next is to kind of give you a sense of where these town halls are going to go over the course of the next few weeks. And we'll try to continue to do this so you're always thinking ahead and can plan on kind of what's coming. But specifically over the course of the next, I believe, 3 weeks, we've kind of laid out a loose agenda of what we're planning on covering. And next week, which will be Wednesday, October the 25th, it's going to be a focus on that initial onboarding call. And we're going to get into a bit of live demonstration. We want you to see a little bit of the inside of the system so you kind of know the things that you're going to be clicking on, right? When you're getting in there to set up the basics of your account. We're going to have a couple of our specialists join the call that are going to walk through some of those steps. I will tell you, one of the things that we're really going to focus on is the types of activities in the system that you have to continuously do. You know, there are some components of setup that you basically set it and forget it, right? Like you put in your service locations and you may have to add some of those on down the line, but to a certain degree, those may remain consistent. So we're not going to focus on the kinds of things that require once or once every blue moon action. We're really going to focus largely on those activities that have to be done consistently, like managing individuals. So if you start providing services to a new person or managing users, you know, you're constantly, no doubt, are bringing in new staff and having to onboard them to the system. How do I quickly create a new staff, get them the appropriate roles and caseloads in the system and have them on their way to conducting EVV services? So we're going to focus on that type of activity so that you're hearing it, quite frankly, a lot, and that it also becomes part of these recordings so that you can easily go back and access that information if you're trying to remember what was said during the calls that you have with our specialists. And again, a lot of the user guides and things that we have available on our resource page are tailored to this type of information as well, but that's really where we're going to focus. We're then also going to walk through some of the EVV configuration that we have in the system and basically kind of how to set up those service descriptions and authorizations. Again, we don't expect anybody to come off this call here as a 100% expert, but the theory is the more times you see something and the more familiarity you get with you, the more it kind of starts sinking in so that when you're on there, with our specialists, the process can flow that much more smoothly, and you guys can continue to remember it, and then you'll have these recordings as a reference point as well, should you need it. Same thing with kind of the overall provider configuration within the system, and then the basics of being able to create plots and edit data that's coming in. All of those kinds of things we're going to touch on next week so that you guys can start seeing some of that. The following week is where we're going to start talking really about billing. And so for some of you guys, particularly those of you that are planning on doing billing and claiming inside of the Therap application, we definitely want you guys to join us for this one. We're going to go through the billing administrative setup of the system beyond just authorization creation, but also how are we going to get in there and get all the rates in there, setting up your provider numbers, claim templates inside of the system, and all of that stuff for folks like me who never did billing, doesn't completely understand. But fortunately, we have some experts on our team that understand it quite well. And so we're going to have them on here to walk through all of that piece with you. Well, we also want that to serve as some of you who are going to utilize the Therap system may not have 100% yet decided whether or not you want to do billing and claiming through our application, and perhaps seeing some of this might help you make a more informed decision in terms of what you want to do. So that's another part of our intent with covering this data on one of our upcoming calls. But that's the plan, largely speaking, for November the 1st. And then November the 8th, and quite frankly, more than likely, November the 8th and potentially 15th and 22nd or whatever the numbers end up being, we're really going to focus on the EVV platform itself. How do I create schedules? How do my direct support folks, my caregivers check in and check out? You know, the basics of conducting EVV. This is really more the straightforward training that we want to provide on multiple occasions so that folks get an opportunity to see that, so that we can get those recorded and get that information out to you as a reference. So generally speaking, that's kind of our plan for the next several weeks. Obviously, we'll dot in some other informational things along the way as necessary. We'll always include some of the basic background information on the project and updates there. But these are going to be kind of the core themes of the stuff that we're going to cover on the next several calls. Now, the review of frequently asked questions. And as you can see, the list this week is a lot shorter than it was the week prior because we obviously had a ton of questions that came in on our initial town hall. And a lot of the questions that came in on our second town hall were frankly repeats of the questions that we had from the first week. And so we're making those available to you. I'm going to show them to you right here in just 1 second. But there were a couple of new questions that came in that we wanted to address publicly with you guys today. The first one, or both of them actually, are related to folks that are intending to utilize a third-party vendor for EVV. And so you've heard me mention several times that they're an end-user legal agreement. Where can I get a hold of that thing? You're going to get that from us when you go in and submit your job. That's the first thing that we send out to you for signature, so you will get a copy of that from us. That's how you'll get access to that. The second piece I've already talked about earlier, but in case some of you guys may have joined a little late or didn't hear this, I want to make sure that folks understand. We had the request that due to the tight timeline, you know, everybody's trying to get this thing up and rolling pretty quickly, but the ability to quickly get in and sign off on all of these agreements, it differs a great deal from agency to agency depending on your structure. So there was a request if we would be willing to send out the API specs for our aggregator ahead of time to your vendors so that they can be looking at that prior to the completion of those agreements. And we are happy to do that with the caveat that I spoke of earlier, and I want to make sure I explicitly say it again. We are not sharing the API specs directly to your vendor at their request. We will share them with you at your request, and then you are certainly free to share it with your vendor. Everything that we're going to be doing here, we're anticipating working through the providers because you're our users, right? You're the folks that are part of the state contract. We want you to be able to use your desired vendor. That is absolutely our intent. But our way of making sure that, yes, in fact, this particular vendor is working with a qualified provider in the state of Kentucky, our way of doing that is making sure that we're working through you. You can then share the necessary information with them so that they can do what they need to do. So if you would like those specs ahead of time, please reach out to us and we will be more than happy to share that with you as you're reviewing those agreements. And certainly if there are any questions on that, please feel free to ask about that. Now, I know back right at the beginning of the call, and Pam, if you could remind me, I might be able to dig through my Q&A here. I know there was a question that came in right at the top of the call that we wanted to discuss once we had everybody on here, and I'm trying to go back in and find it. I'm going to give me oh, I think, yes, that's right. There was some question about the distinction between what is an EHR and what is an EVV. What is an EHR vendor and what is an EVV vendor? Because probably by this point, the overwhelming majority of you all are working with some form of EHR vendor or an electronic health record, which is the system where you go in and you have all of the information about the people you support, you're documenting services being provided, you've got clinical information in there. There's probably a ton of stuff in there. And so all of you are using different versions of an EHR. For what it's worth, Therap is a comprehensive EHR as well. So we're quite familiar with the structure of what an EHR is. Now, that's one thing. An EVV vendor is another thing. That is a vendor that is able to capture EVV related information to meet the 6 requirements associated with the Cures Act for certified EVV services, making sure you're tracking, the location of services, what services delivered, the individual, the staff providing it, the date and the time of the service delivery. And I may have missed one in there, but essentially making sure that you're meeting all of those requirements. Now, some EHR vendors also offer EVV vendors. There are some EVV vendors that are not a comprehensive EHR. So they may be, in your particular instance, it might be one and the same. Your EHR vendor may offer a certified EVV product, or they may not. We can't obviously answer that for you. It is up to you to speak to your EHR vendor and ask if you want to pursue using them as an EVV. Do they have that? Are they willing to share information through the Therap aggregator? And you want to pursue that, then you guys can reach out to us, let us know. We'll do everything we can to get them up and running and sharing information with the aggregator. If you have an EHR that you love and want to continue using, but they do not use EVV, that's fine. You can continue to use your EHR for your clinical services, but in that instance, you will need to utilize Therap electronic visit verification or some other certified EVV vendor. So if there are any questions there, again, as I said, as to whether or not your particular EHR vendor also offers an EVV platform, that's a discussion to be had with them. Obviously, we can't answer that. But we can, as I said earlier, provide you some additional information. We do have an attestation form that we can share with you, which basically shows you all the things that the EVV vendor needs to be able to do. We can share that. That's part of our onboarding process for third-party vendors. So we can certainly help. But there is some communication that's going to need to happen between you and your vendor. And again, I know I've said it multiple times and I'll keep saying it though, our communication is going to go directly through you. So don't ask your vendor to contact us directly. We need to work through you. That's the way that we can verify with whom they're working and what needs to happen there. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. So I think, let me check here. Oh, that's right. I also wanted to make sure that folks knew, as I said before, we had a lot of other questions that we answered in the last call, over the last couple of calls, and we have incorporated those into our site. So I wanted to show you guys where that's at. If you click on that EVV site that I had up earlier, and you go in here, you can see that we have got the frequently asked questions loaded up right here on the site. So you can quickly get in and see the responses to the question. You can also click on the links for some of the user guides that are getting referenced in here. We've tried to go in and break them up by their various categories, depending on what type of information that you want to see. We've got that in there. As we continue to conduct these town halls and get them recorded and capture all the questions, we're going to continue to add to this. So it becomes a more and more robust resource for you. But want to make sure that you guys know how to access that and where that information is located. Beyond that, again, there's a ton of training resources there. I know I keep jumping back and forth over to that exact same site, but that's okay. It's good for you guys to know all of the stuff that's there. As you can see, we've got a lot of resources on this site that will be helpful. You can go through different topics and get user guides on various components of the system very easily. There's a great deal of information here. Really, this is intended to supplement the one-on-one support that you're getting from our specialists as you're onboarding, but this is available to you all the time. We also have recordings of the town hall meetings. We appreciate CHFS reporting these things and getting them posted, and we're giving you a direct link so that you can see these are the last two. You will find the one from today posted up here fairly soon. Within the next couple of days, we'll try to get that up for you as well. And then one other thing of note I wanted to put on here, because it's a new addition that we put on here. Your training specialist that you work with at Therapy is going to share this information with you, so you don't have to go running out and finding it immediately on your own. But it is worth knowing where you can find it if you want to reference it. We have created a training course in here with some basics of onboarding with Kentucky EVV and kind of going through that setup. So you can go in and look at this information and see this, and you can hear that it talks to you, which I forgot it talks. Sorry about that. But you can go in and go through all of the different steps associated with that and have that as a reference point for you. Again, our staff are going to be going through all of that information with you in your one-on-one calls, but it is here as a resource as well. And I believe that brings us to the end of the content of what we wanted to share today. I do want to, again, remind everyone of our ongoing schedule for the town hall. We'll continue to do these on Wednesday afternoon, and our plan for next Wednesday, October the 25th at 1 p.m. is we're going to be focusing on that call on kind of that the content of the onboarding calls, with our folks getting in and demonstrating kind of the setup process for a lot of the different things within the system to help better prepare you and also give you a resource to refer back to on what those processes will look like. Fortunately, if you're here on this call today, it means that you have registered through Zoom for this call, and you are now registered for all of the calls going forward. Part of the reason we moved it over to Zoom so that we have a recurring link, so you don't have to get a new link every week to get on here. You should have that recurring link and can easily access that as part of the ongoing series. But with that, I believe that covers everything that I wanted to share today. So before we close out the call, let me ask our friends from Kentucky, Pam or April or Kelly, is there anything else that we want to make sure that we're touching on before we close out the call this afternoon?
Jason, I just sent you a couple notes, but here I can just read to you. So maybe can we go over again so I'm a provider, I'm going to use a third-party vendor. What do I need to do next?
Okay.
And then kind of along the same token, or I want to use Therap, what do I need to do next? And how long should I wait for someone to contact me before I know I need to kind of reach back out?
Okay. So we'll answer those two things. I'm going to answer them in reverse order. I'm going to start with those of you. Well, actually, I'll take a further step back. Regardless of what your choice is, whether you want to utilize Therapy, you want to utilize a third-party vendor, the very first thing that you need to do is submit an entry through this job form that I have on the screen right now. You all should have received this in one way or another over the course of the last couple of weeks. I know we've sent it out a few times. I know the state has forwarded it along. But if for whatever reason you haven't seen this thing, please reach out to us at kysupport@therapservices.net, and we will get you a link to this form. We will get it to you today. If there's any question about that, let us know, and we will send that out to you. But once you receive that link, what you're going to see, when you click on that link, you're going to go in and be able to basically categorize yourself as to either going to use the EVV solution or use a third-party vendor. The first two are for existing Therap customers. I don't believe amongst the home health folks we've got too many of those. If you do, you can certainly use one of these links, and we'll follow up with you as appropriate, but this will probably be more on the personal care side. But really for you guys is to focus on these last two options. If you want to use Therap's EVV solution, you select that and you submit this information right here. It's going to ask you basic information about your organization, contact info, your administrator's name and contact info, all of that stuff. You submit that, it comes to us. You will also immediately receive a calendar invite where you can select a day and time for your initial onboarding call with one of our specialists. You'll be able to select it right off the calendar and pick a time that works for you and your team. That will then set that up with one of our folks. We'll get on there with you and begin the onboarding process. Now, once you get on that call, the kinds of things that you're going to be covering are the things that I discussed here on this particular slide. You're going to be reviewing the basic setup of your Therap account, how to create your logins, how to create your programs in the system, which are going to be your locations where you're delivering service, how to create individuals, how to create your staff members and get them the appropriate roles inside of the system. Basically, we're going to walk you step by step through that whole process to get things up and going. So that's going to be how you initiate that process if you are a Therap EVV user. And again, we're going to continue to walk through it with you through the entire process. For those of you that are interested in utilizing your own vendor, the third-party vendor, you will, let me go back to my job form, instead of the third up, you're going to select the fourth option as a third-party vendor, where, again, we're going to ask you some basic information about your organization, but the questions are going to be a little bit different. We are going to ask you to identify who your third-party vendor is and some contact information from them so that we have that info on record. And when you submit this information, the response you get from us is going to be slightly different. You're going to have someone reach out to you to provide you with some business user agreements, which is what needs to be signed off on for us to establish that connection to our Therap aggregator. Once you sign off on those agreements, then we will get you the information needed to begin building to the API spec to send data to the aggregator. Now, one of the key things that was shared today, based off of some requests that we had, is that we are willing to share those API specs to the aggregator prior to completion of the DocuSign business agreement, because we know it can take a minute to get some of those things signed off on. If you would like us to share those specs with you, please feel free to ask that information. Again, you can send us information through the KY support alias if you would like, that sort of thing. Again, though, and I can't emphasize this enough, if you tell your vendor to reach out to us, we will not provide that information directly to the vendor. We work through the providers. That is our way of effectively doing the quality control, right? Making sure that we're only sharing information with vendors that are working with our providers that we're supposed to be working with, and make sure that you're the one doing the submission. Now, we'll share with you the information. You can obviously share it with your vendor. That's what we want to happen, but the request has to come from you. But that's the particular step that you need to take if you want to utilize third party. And typically, when you go in and submit one of the job forms, you will get an immediate response. That's automated, particularly for those that are going to be using their EVV platform. You're going to get an automated response with a calendar invite. If you submit a third party and indicate you want to use a third party, you're going to get a quick automated response. And then our team member, usually almost immediately, she's on top of her email, she is going to come back and submit to you those agreements. She's going to send those to you, and you should receive them within a matter of an hour or two, I would think, in most instances. If you submit on a day and then you make it to the next day and you have not heard anything from us in those scenarios, please reach back out. We expect to be extremely responsive in these scenarios. So please let us know if you haven't gotten that bit of follow-up. We know that some of you guys have submitted information in multiple ways, and we understand you're trying to get your questions answered, and certainly that's fine. So we've had folks that'll send something in through KY support, and then the job form will come a little bit later, and we're trying to manage that info that's coming in and making sure that we're talking to the right people and that sort of stuff. So if for whatever reason you feel like we're not getting back to you in a timely fashion, please do not hesitate to continue to reach out. We will get to you, and if we haven't gotten back to you usually within 24 hours at the most, it's for an unanticipated oversight. So please feel free to reach back out.
One other thing is, can you clarify about the social security numbers? What level of, how much of that will they be required to enter for their staff in the system?
Yes. So for your users, when you're creating in there, we're asking that you have the social security number for your staff to be able to enter into the system, because that is what's going to be used to create a unique identifier for the users within the aggregator. That is pretty much as simple as that. And so that's why we want to have that information in there. If there's any deeper questions about that, you can let us know. Hopefully that's going to be fairly straightforward with you guys. But if anybody has any concerns or questions about it, you can ask, but that's the reason that we want it. Again, we do have fields for some other information about users that you can use in there, but the things that I have on the screen right now about your users, the name and the social, those are crucial. We want that information in there. The login is a required element. Any user in the system, you have to create a login for them so that they'll be able to get into Thera. And you can create the login on the spot. We just ask that if you have like a typical convention that you use, like I said earlier, like first name dot last name or whatever, if you have some other means of typically identifying your staff, having that available so that you can quickly enter it in there. So it'll be a seamless process for getting those folks into the system. So those are the things that we need. Any other questions? And again, I'm sure there's probably some other things that have come in through the system. We're going to collect all of the things that you guys have been submitting through the chat and through the Q&A, and we'll go back through them. You know, we're trying to hit the high spots on those things that are most universally being asked for from everybody. But as we go back through here, if we find some things that we did not get a chance to answer, we will try to get that data collected and get some answers posted up on our site, certainly before the next call. So we'll do our best to do that. Anything else, Pam or anyone else?
No, I know we've tried to answer some of the questions as we have been going through there. I know we did not get to all of them. So as Jason said, we will collect all of these, and we're working on the comprehensive FAQ document that will get posted. We will get that, we'll get the recording and the deck out there as soon as we can. And, you know, don't hesitate to reach out to me or use our, you know, the Medicaid public comment, reach out to Thera, and let us know what questions you have. Or, I mean, even it's simple as I'm trying to fill out the form, because I've heard this, I'm trying to fill out the form and I'm stuck. I don't know what to put. I don't know what to put for this answer. So reach out to one of us to help you. And I will say, you know, if you put something wrong on the form and we need to change it, it's okay. It's more important that we get the form and get a contact and get that contact established than the form being perfect. And in that same token, if you think, okay, we think we're going to use a third party vendor, and then you decide, you know what, I don't want to do that, I'm going to use Thera, that's okay too. You have the option to change things. We're not locking you in to one or the other. You know, you may get into this and decide you want to go a different route, and that's okay, and we'll support you. But the biggest thing is to make contact right now, and so that we can have a relationship with somebody within your agency that we can be working with.
Absolutely, yes. Great plan. Thank you for that, Pam. Certainly, we know you guys may not know the answers to all the questions yet. So the ability to change your mind is certainly very much part of this, but just establishing that relationship and getting the process moving is what's going to be most beneficial in that. So yeah, absolutely agree. All right, guys. Well, again, we really appreciate your time this afternoon. As Pam mentioned, we're going to try to get all the recordings up and posted pretty soon, get those questions available for you guys. We'll take a look at all the things that were submitted and get back to you. And at any point along the way, please feel free to reach out to us directly with any questions at kysupport@therapservices.net. And otherwise, we will close out the call, let you guys go. And again, we appreciate it. We'll talk with you all soon. Thanks, everybody.